Aloha! I'm thrilled to be exploring my favorite place on Earth, the tide pools. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson on the littoral zone at Swami's, a marine protected area in North County, San Diego. Since we will be at a marine protected area, the animals are protected by state and federal laws. It is also the reason there is so much diversity present here. Have you ever wondered what creates the tide pools? The tide pools are created by the gravitational force between the moon and the sun. The best time to visit the tide pools is during a spring tide. This doesn't mean spring like the season, but rather the time when the water springs forth onto the shoreline. This creates the ebb and flow of the seashore. A reef tide is when there is moderate rocky reef exposed, creating less tide movement. There are 4 zones within the tide pools that I would like to introduce to you today. When you visit them yourself, try to label the different parts of the zonation. The low tide zone is where we will see the most diversity present. Diversity is the variation of life forms present in one ecosystem. Diversity is great for ecosystem health. The middle tide zone is mostly covered in water, exposed during spring tides. The high zone and the splash zone are where the most resilient species live, as they are more exposed to the harsh environments. Why are tide pool critters so well adapted for these harsh environments? These organisms have evolved to be able to withstand changes in their environment. Can you guess what kind of changes they endure? You guessed it, there are daily changes in salinity and temperature due to evaporation. There are huge changes in wave activity and lots of human activity, especially during the summer. In this week's lesson, we are going to learn about a few organisms found mostly in the mid-tide zone of the tide pools. These are the most recognized and resilient creatures that I'm sure you'll find some of. Can you tell me what this organism is? You guessed it, anemone. Aggregating anemones are adapted to live in the resilient coastal environment. You will notice that they have adapted to close when the water recedes in order to keep their water inside their jelly-like bodies. Did you know that anemones are related to jellyfish and coral? The stinging cells that you may have heard about in Finding Nemo are actually safe to touch since our skin is much thicker than fish's. The stinging cells help them sting unsuspecting crabs, snails, and critters found in the tide pools. Do you know what makes these different from jellyfish? Well, anemones become immobile, also known as sessile, at a certain point in their lifetime. They may be found inching away from opposing colonies in a territory battle they fight with these stinging cells seen in the picture below. The organism forms colonies of genetically identical material. The anemones are asexually reproductive and they spawn larvae only once per year. Another super resilient organism found in the tide pools are the mussels. These bivalves create a super strong tendon-like structure that attach them to the substrate like glue. This structure is called Bissell Threads and can withstand the heavy impact of forces found in the intertidal zone. The threads are being studied for use in artificial tendons for the medical field, as well as for underwater submarine glue. This thread is like silk and has the chance to revolutionize the way we look at protecting aquatic ecosystems. This structure can also be used as a defense mechanism. Naturally, their predators are birds, humans, sea stars, and passing mollusks. Nutritionally, mussels provide an excellent source of folate, selenium, vitamin B12, and zinc, which make them a delicacy in the United States and around the world. Here is an image of a chitin unusually off the rocks. They have armored-plated and tiny metallic teeth. They are archaic and unique for their strong teeth that burrow into the clay substrate. Did you know that barnacles are related to crustaceans like crabs and lobsters? Like other crustaceans, barnacles will molt periodically to grow. The molting process begins with the animal making a small crack in its hard exoskeleton. Once the crack is large enough, the animal climbs out and the body expands for several days. A new exoskeleton then hardens and the process will repeat periodically. This is a picture of a red thatched barnacle. This organism is known as a filter feeder, which filters out organic particles from the ecosystem. This process cleans the water and is helpful for the intertidal ecosystem water balance. Here is an image of a gooseneck barnacle. This is also a filter feeder, which is consumed by humans as a delicacy. I know by now you're wondering why I haven't talked about crabs yet. They are so fun to watch, and I want to invite you to observe crabs. How do they move? What do you notice about them? They have hard exoskeletons and 10 legs. They molt by using the scissor-like apparatus to prepare the exoskeleton. As they grow, they use their jointed legs to climb out of their old exoskeleton. You can tell if a crab has recently molted by lightly touching the hard outer shell. Is it soft or is it hard? The softer it is, the more likely it recently molted. Crabs will spend much time hiding in crevices while they wait for their exoskeleton to harden. In this picture, you can see a few different exoskeletons we found on the beach. It's a perfect opportunity to use our observation skills. Can you guess which crab is a male and which is a female? The male has a thin center on its carapace. For this class, we will call the center an apron. The female has an apron called a brood pouch, which is round. This round brood pouch carries her eggs and keeps them safe. During their larval stage, they will use this apparatus to swim as they travel through the currents before they land at the tide pool of their destination. Did you know that hermit crabs do not create their own shells? They find new shells by climbing out of old ones that they have outgrown and using old shells left behind by snails. How cool is that? This is why we don't take shells from the beach. It's important to leave behind the shells so they can be recycled, reused, and repurposed in the marine ecosystem. Stay tuned for our special guest, the sea stars, starring next week. We will dive into more organisms found on the beach and explore our oceans. Be curious and enjoy the tide pools. Ask your parents to take you to the tides. Remember, the best tides are every full moon and new moon, so look up at the sky and see for yourself, or ask your parents to look them up online. Happy seeking!